You ready?
Yeah.
You ready? All right, hold on. Here we go.
What's going on, everyone? This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. We're back this week with the usual crew. With the Eagle, there's Alex Miller over there. What's going on, Alex?
Not a lot, Travis.
And the father. I swear, Zach. And sorry, but you look like you're a little slimmer and trimmer these days.
Doing what I can. I eat less with a child screaming all the time, so there's less time to sit and stuff my face. I've been working out for about a year at this row. I'll give them a shout out anyways. This row house, and so there are actually classes that you go to and you row. But again, I've been doing it for a year.
Are you the coxswain?
They don't use that one. No.
That's the person that tells.
I guess I was.
What
go ahead.
What pace to row at?
Oh, okay. I got you. See,
Or
I
the
just
person
thought,
with the microphone that's in the front of the boat.
I just call her Coach.
Oh,
Just
well,
Coach.
You should call her coxswain next time. See how that works.
Yeah, I'll pull that one out next time. I'll think about that.
Okay. So anyway, big matchup this week with A&M and Arkansas at AT&T Stadium. Probably about the most anticipated, exciting matchup that the two has had. Mostly because it's not at 11 a.m. It's at 2:30, and both teams are ranked. Zach, what's your initial thoughts on this matchup coming up, and are you as excited as I am about this matchup?
Well, yeah, it's going to be Texas A&M's. I would say it was going to be their first big test, right? But Colorado obviously proved that was going to be their first big test. Coming into this, I'm really interested to see what these offenses look like, because we've seen what KJ Jefferson and Arkansas can do, but they've got a couple of offensive linemen that are banged up as well. That came out yesterday that their starting center, and I believe one of their guards very well might be out for this ball game. Their starting center is the reigning SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. So if they're missing those guys, that's huge. And then what is Texas A&M's offensive line going to look like? I mean, what we saw against New Mexico, there were guys that were banged up and bruised. Layden Robinson, if it was an SEC game, he very well could have played. With New Mexico, they gave him the week off after he got banged up against Colorado. But even at full strength, the Aggie O-line has been looking lost, man. And that was the big question coming into the season. The big question mark, I should say, for Texas A&M, even more so than at quarterback. What's this offensive line going to look like after losing 4 starters? And so far has looked pretty, I wouldn't even say pedestrian. I would say it's probably less than that, because they got absolutely bullied against New Mexico. Now you're heading into the teeth of SEC play. What are things going to look like against the Arkansas, not to mention the Alabamas of the world and the Auburns of the world? So there's a lot of question marks coming into this. I think we'll know a lot after this. Is A&M really the 7th-ranked team in the country, or are they way overrated? And I think a lot of people are wanting to know that. And as well as, hey, Arkansas has played one legitimate opponent, and that was Texas. Completely ran them out of the stadium. But how good is Texas right now? Because who have they played besides Arkansas? Early on in the season, a lot of questions. These are the first 2 big opponents that either one of these teams has played, I guess you could say. And so really interested to see what shows up on Saturday.
It kind of sounded like you said first of the 2 pig opponents these have played.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the only one pig opponent that A&M will have
Just
played so
one.
far. That being said, yeah, the offensive line is a big question mark for me. And it's interesting that the game before they play Arkansas is the one where Jimbo has to call out the physicality of the team, because Arkansas is always, even when they haven't been good, it's been a physical contest. I mean, I remember going back, wasn't it Arkansas 4 years ago that Myles Garrett got real banged up in?
Yeah.
And that had him in and out of the season. It was always, and then think about, was it, who was the Arkansas quarterback who just took a beating that one game?
One of the Allen brothers. I can't remember which one it was.
Austin Allen. He just took a beating that game and just stayed in and stayed the course. It's always been a physical game, and it kind of starts as they always say up front. I think that you saw how frustrated Isaiah Spiller was getting after only getting 1 or 2 yards a carry against New Mexico last week. And so, yeah, the offensive line is going to be, in my opinion, what makes or breaks A&M in this game, because I think Zach Calzada has proven he can manage the game just fine to win it. And you have Spiller and A-Chain in the backfield. You have wide receivers that can do their job. Defense is going to stand up strong. It's all down to the offensive line. Alex, do you think that this offensive line, you think just inserting Layden Robinson, if he's going to be available, is enough to right the ship on that?
I think it does a lot. I think Layden Robinson is arguably A&M's second best lineman alongside or right behind Kenyon Green, and he plays right alongside Kenyon Green on that right side of that line. So yeah, I think that getting him back is significant for the Aggies. This is definitely a game, not to be cliche, but it's going to be one down in the trenches, especially depending on who's available and how healthy everybody is. I could see this game. One, I think it's going to be a classic down to the wire, who can grind it out type of game. These are the A&M Arkansas games we've kind of just become accustomed to, I feel like, over the last decade. But, I could see this being like a 17-10 kind of defensive slugfest. Maybe if one team scores 20 points, that might be enough to win the game. It won't be as ugly, I think, as what A&M's performance against Colorado was. But Arkansas, very strong on defense, very veteran led. You think about guys like Bumper Pool, Jalen Catalon, probably one of the best defensive backs in the entire conference, if not the best. Third-year guy. He'll probably be drafted next spring. So, definitely getting a guy like Layden Robinson back is huge for A&M. We'll see how healthy he could be, but yes, Travis, I think that's the big benefit for the Aggies if he can play.
I'll be interested to see the matchup between graduate transfer defensive tackle John Ridgway, who had a really big game against Texas and was able to really disrupt some stuff on the offensive line, against freshman Bryce Foster at center. That's going to be probably the biggest challenge he's faced up front, right over the ball like that. And that could be one of the biggest matchups on the offensive line this weekend. So, and Alex, I want to go in and say, you just called it going to be a low scoring slugfest. That means it's going to be aired out and a absolute shootout. That's just usually how these games goes.
Yep.
It's a question we seem to ask every year. This one, I think, makes a little bit more sense with both being in the top 25, but why is this game always so close? It just seems like no matter what two teams present on paper, it's going to be a close game, whether it's a shootout or it's a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of game.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if it's Arkansas just gets up for this game. They know Jerry Jones is in the stands. Arkansas tends to travel pretty well. They kind of hype it up to be more of a home game for them, I feel like, in a lot of senses. But it's early on. Most years. That is really interesting, though. I can't quite put my finger on why these games have been close, but I guess maybe since it started out that way, it just it's just one of those games where it's gonna be a close one. Travis, you mentioned even in the years that Arkansas is not good, they're a really physical team. They've got really big guys that are hard to block, hard to defend. They're gonna go hard. But we've seen the last couple of years where A&M's just kind of out talented them. Finally catching up in some of those regards. But yeah, very interesting that this is always a close game. Zach, what do you think?
Since Texas A&M entered the SEC, every game that has not been close in this rivalry has been played away from Jerry World. So you got to think that the location has something to do with that, because again, every game and A&M's won them all since arriving in the SEC, but all of the games that the Aggies have blown past Arkansas have been away from AT&T Stadium. But yeah, I think a lot of it because it's generally the first SEC game of the year for both teams, and so you're still trying to sort things out and figure things out. I agree with Alex when he says Arkansas is always physical. Their lines are always physical. They've always got some talent up front, some big guys up front, and that has helped curtail whatever kind of advantage A&M might have there in a lot of ways. And this is looked at as a rivalry game. And if you're Arkansas right now, you see, hey, look, A&M has beaten us this many years in a row now. 9 years in a was it 9 or 8?
9.
9 years in a row now. My math is kind of fuzzy. I went to A&M. 9 years in a row now, and they're getting up for this game. And now you're coming in. You have got a full head of steam behind you. Suddenly, you got a brand new coach that has built this this following. And the Hogs fans are going to be out in full force. You're ranked for the first time in a long time, and they've been waiting for something like this. And so I have no doubt that Woo Pig Sooie will be really evident in Arlington, even with it being a neutral site game.
Yeah, I think rivalry is exactly what it comes down to. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when we were at SEC Media Day, and a lot of the Arkansas players were saying the team that they wanted to beat most of that season, in any season, was A&M. And with the history they have, I think that whether they admit it or not, it's played with the same intensity as a rivalry game. And I think that's exactly why those games have been so close and they've been so physical coming into that. So we're 3 games into the season. It's a small sample size, but it's the almost all of the entire non-conference sample size, save for the one cupcake game at the end of the year. Give me one player or unit that has impressed you more than you thought, and one that has you have some more questions to answer. And we'll go ahead and throw the offensive line off the table since we've already broken them down. So one group that has overachieved, and maybe one that's underachieved. Zach?
I would think overachieved, you'd have to go with the secondary if you're talking about a group. Not allowing over 100 yards passing yet, and I get that you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. None of the teams, I would argue that Kent State's a pretty good passing team. I mean, Crum, believe it or not, is a pretty good passer, all things considered. So I think the secondary has been a pretty pleasant surprise for a lot of Aggie fans so far this year. I know it gets overlooked a lot by that defensive line, but yeah, the secondary has performed very, very well. One that's been kind of meh, I would venture to say the wide receiving core. And I get they had a big game. You've got guys like Damon Demas had his big breakout game. Moose Muhammad with that insane catch that he made for a touchdown has been awfully impressive. But I mean, overall, there have been sometimes some plays that you're thinking, man, that guy should have caught that. So there's been some drops. Now, that's always going to happen, but it does seem, especially with a quarterback like Zach Calzada, if I can get that out right, has not had a lot of experience. You've got to be able to help him out on 50-50 balls. And that's been a big question for A&M for a long time. That, hey, where's the guy that can get up and get it and take it, basically pluck it out of the defender's hand, and he can beat him on a one-on-one matchup? You're still waiting to see that. I'm not saying that they can't accomplish that. I'm not saying that they don't have the talent to do that, but you're still kind of waiting for that big breakout game. Will it ever come with Zach Calzada, or is it going to come with Haynes King? Will it ever come this season? Because, again, you got to get a line that blocks for you in order to find open guys. But the wide receiving core, if we're talking about something other than the offensive line, has still got a lot to prove.
I'll go with I'll kind of dovetail off what you said, and I'll go with Leon O'Neal as someone who's maybe overachieved a little bit. And I'll say it not necessarily in his the stats and stuff he's put up, but he just seems like a much more mature player. There was always that one step forward, 2 steps back with him over the last 2 years playing, where he would make one good play and take 2 personal fouls in a game. And it was hard to say that he had a good game, even if he made some big plays. And he seems like he's been a really mature force and voice in that backfield, had a really big game against Kent State. And so I'd go with Leon O'Neal to go with the, maybe, I don't want to say if underachieving describes this as well, but when you go back to the wide receivers, you talk about drops. Anaya Smith has a decent amount of drops this season. And if you add in that muffed punt against Kent State, even though it didn't really affect the outcome of the game, it doesn't seem like he's just been quite as locked in as had been last year. And so him, and then you want to throw the linebacking core back in there, because while the defense has been great, they have been gashed a few times up the middle by some runs, especially some quarterback keepers. And I'd be curious to see exactly how the linebackers respond against Arkansas this week. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna echo the sentiment you guys have had on the defensive backs, and Antonio Johnson's been the guy that's really stood out to me. I mean, the way that he covers guys. I mean, especially when passes are completed. I mean, there's hardly any yards after catch when he is covering a guy, and he's playing that nickel position. You know, it's probably more zone. You got to react and get covered on the fly. He has played phenomenal. He's been used in stunts and blitzes, made some plays in the backfield. He is a guy that has really come on as probably one of the better players on A&M's defense so far. A unit that has kind of been concerning is just special teams holistically. Nick Constantino has been solid at punter, which was reflected in him earning punter of the week honors this last week. He's been great. But other than that, A&M's had some mishaps. You know, you think about Seth Small's missed field goal against Colorado right after Haynes King went down. You know, that kept A&M from taking an early 3-0 lead. It was only about a 45-yard field goal. Seth's got the leg to make that. And then, you know, you think about the muffed punt that Anais Smith had. Last week, the two holding or the two penalties or the penalty call that negated the flag or the touchdown, I should say, against New Mexico. And then, you know, the snap when Caden Davis came in at the end of the game, you know, we've seen all around A&M's had some issues, even on kickoff. You know, Jimbo mentioned Caden, who can kick it out of the end zone every single time, kicking it short, not covering really well. You look back at some of these Arkansas games, special teams has been a huge reason why A&M's been able to pull out some of these close wins. I mean, you go back to 2017, Christian Kirk taking it to the house 100 yards to put A&M back ahead in the fourth quarter, and then Daniel Cameron coming back later, making a 27-yard field goal to send it to overtime. And then you go to 2019, A&M holding on to a 1-point lead, and Seth Small comes in and makes a 50-yard field goal with just under 4 minutes left to put A&M up 4, forcing Arkansas to have to score a touchdown. You know, they can't rely on just a field goal at that point to win the game, or tie it. So, you know, A&M's got veteran guys on special teams. When you think about Seth Small, a senior, Caden Davis this third year, Connor Choate named 12th man. He's been really solid as a snapper. And then Anais Smith, you know, can A&M kind of clean it up on special teams, especially in a game like this that you know is probably going to be close, and that third phase of the game could really come into play down the stretch, as we've seen them time and time again.
For sure, Zach. Alex and I will give our thoughts on how this game will play out in the second segment. But before we close this one out, is this the year that Arkansas ends the streak?
Yes. I think Arkansas picks up a win on Saturday. You know, I just have not seen anything from this Aggie offensive line that makes me think they're going to be able to protect Zach Calzada. I'm not saying that he hasn't made some good plays under pressure, but I think he'll get picked off. I think he'll try and force the ball in there. He'll turn the ball over at some time. And I agree with Alex. I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game. And turnovers are going to, whoever commits the most turnovers is going to lose the ball game. And I think the Aggies are probably going to have 1 or 2 of those at least. So, I think Arkansas wins it, touchdown or less, 7 points or less. But I think they do pick up a win on Saturday.
There it is. Well, we'll be back with another segment, and we have a treat for you. The SEC legend Bob Holt joins the podcast to help break down the Arkansas side of things. That's next on the My Aggie Nation podcast. What's going on, everyone? Travis Brown with Eagle, here with Robert Cessna of Eagle, also Alex Miller of Eagle. We're looking forward to the big Southeastern Classic. I don't know why. Southwestern Classic. What am I talking about?
Southwest.
I'm here over here at baseball. It's fall baseball season. I'm mixed, but it is the Southwest Classic, A&M versus Arkansas. We have our special guest, the man, the legend, Bob Holt, on here with us. Bob, how's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, they ought to call it. They used to be in the Southwest Conference Classic, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's start off with Bob. What from an Arkansas standpoint, what are some of the key storylines and the things you're looking out for leading up to this big game this weekend at AT&T Stadium?
Well, just kind of can Arkansas keep it going? They're off to this 3-0 start. It's pretty amazing if you remember what Arkansas was like a couple of years ago. I mean, they obviously made progress last year under Sam Pittman, winning 3 SEC games and having a chance to win, really, were robbed of the Auburn game, honestly, and could have won a couple more. And so they're obviously getting better, but I don't think anybody in their right mind thought Arkansas would be ranked. A couple of years ago, I mean, they were really one of the worst Power 5 teams in the country. And so it really speaks to what this coaching staff has done, what Sam Pittman and his assistants have done. And honestly, it also shows that while Arkansas was not Alabama, they weren't devoid of talent either. Honestly, the previous staff just wasn't getting the most out of those guys. But yeah, the big question is, they had a huge win over Texas here. Can they keep it going? Can they do it away from Fayetteville? Because they're 3-0 all in Fayetteville and having big crowds back. Big crowd for Texas. It was really into that game. And so are they ready for this challenge? Are they ready to try to beat him for the first time in 10 years?
Hey, Bob, I'm interested. I read a lot about Texas, and I knew how important a game that is, going way back, 69, whatever. So I knew Arkansas would be really up. That would be such a big win for them. How do they view A&M? Because, they're back playing A&M. I keep mentioning they've lost 9 in a row. How does, beat A&M, or where does that stand on the totem pole compared to beating Texas?
Well, they just hate Texas. I don't think beating any. I mean, it depends on who you ask. They'd probably rather beat Texas than Alabama. Now, obviously, some of the younger kids and guys the age of these players, they don't really remember the Texas rivalry from the Southwest Conference. But if you're of a certain age, like over 40, Texas is, they probably want to beat Texas as bad as A&M wants to beat Texas. If they still play. And so that was a huge deal. And it really was a statement, it was on ESPN prime time, and, Arkansas got to show off their stadium. They had a ton of recruits in. It was just a really big win on a lot of levels. But A&M, I mean, it's an old Southwest Conference rival. It's a team that, it's been a good series, but honestly, before this recent A&M run, Arkansas had dominated the series, at the end of the Southwest Conference days when Frank Broyles, first got Arkansas really going in the late 50s and the 60s. And then by Petrino, his last 3 years, they played A&M and beat them every year, had some crazy comebacks. And so, Arkansas is definitely sick of losing to Texas A&M. And I'm sure Jerry Jones is really tired of having that trophy over to the Aggies. I know he respects A&M, but it's got to be killing him that his Razorbacks have lost 9 in a row in his stadium, and he so badly wanted this series in his stadium.
Kind of going off of Cease's question, I'm a little too young to remember the days of Arkansas playing A&M and Texas in the same year, but it's kind of not common anymore that they play them in the same season. But what would it mean for the Razorbacks to beat both the Longhorns and the Aggies in the same season?
Well, it'd be huge because, one, they're both really good. I mean, Texas, you can say what you like. They're ranked 15th. Wouldn't be surprised to see them get back in the rankings. They're obviously a quality program. They haven't been what they once were, but it's Texas, and A&M is Jimbo's really got them going. They won 12 in a row. I think that's the longest winning streak since 92. And, it would be huge because, first of all, you're talking about beating 2 ranked teams, and also Arkansas, recruits in Texas. They don't sign as many players, obviously, from Texas as Texas and A&M do, or Oklahoma probably. But, Texas is very important to Arkansas going back to Frank Broyles' days. And so it would really be – it would mean a lot just to be 2 really good programs, but also for recruiting, I think it would really be big for Arkansas.
A lot being said of KJ Jefferson, the quarterback, and what he's been able to bring, but also a lot about the physicality of Arkansas's offense, which is usually a staple of that team. Would you say that the strength of this offense is the run game? Is it the pass game? Is it the balance between the two? How would you kind of define what KJ Jefferson and this offense has been able to do so far this season?
Yeah, it's definitely been the running game. I mean, they just honestly ran the ball down Texas's throat. And what you really got from that game was Texas doesn't have the linemen to compete consistently in the SEC right now. I think if Texas was an SEC, let's say Texas had to play Arkansas' schedule. And of course, Arkansas has I guess you can call it the good fortune or the misfortune. They play Georgia. They don't get to play Vanderbilt or South Carolina. They're playing Georgia. At least they don't have to play Florida. They got to play all those West teams. And obviously and they're getting A&M in a neutral site after having to go to College Station. But I think if Texas had to play Arkansas' schedule, and would lose to Arkansas, I think Texas would go 6-6 or 7-5. They're just not ready to challenge physically in this league. Arkansas just blew them off the ball. Ran for 333 yards. What really impressed me was Texas scored early in the fourth quarter, about 13 minutes left, cut it to, I think it was 33-19. So, it's still a game. And, Arkansas wants to run the ball. They want to run clock. Arkansas went 75 yards in 8 plays, never passed, gave the ball to 2 freshman running backs, and Texas couldn't stop. Everybody in the stadium knew they were going to run the ball, and they just kept plowing Texas. So, and KJ Jefferson, a much better runner than Felipe Franks. Now, Felipe Franks, he's on an NFL roster. He's got a big-time arm. And KJ Jefferson's got a strong arm, but sometimes you don't know where the ball's going. I don't mean that as a knock on a kid. He's a heck of an athlete, and, he's just a redshirt sophomore. This is his first time to be the starter. He started a couple games, played well at Missouri last year, got thrown to the fire at LSU as a freshman. And he's got a big-time arm, but he can really run the ball. He's physical. I mean, I don't exactly know what he weighs. He told us in camp he weighed 245 and he wanted to lose some weight, and then he was down at 237. I don't know if it's a mistake, but Sam Pittman on his radio show the last couple of weeks has called him 255. I don't think he's quite that big, but he's a load. And I can just imagine being a cornerback. If you see KJ Jefferson coming around that end and he's got a head of steam built up, I wouldn't want to be trying to tackle him. So, but definitely the run, and they've got a really good stable of running backs. Traylon Smith, their junior from Houston's the number 1 guy, but these freshmen, Rocket Sanders and AJ Green and Dominic Johnson, a sophomore, has been really, really good. They've got a really good group of running backs, and they're not afraid to use all of them.
Bob, that same line is, what's the health of that Arkansas team? Saw a lot of reports that maybe they could be missing 1 or 2 linemen. And I know A&M's had some injury problems, which hurt them last week. What is the health of that physicality that Arkansas has been able to show everybody else?
Well, yeah, it's up in the air, really, what their offensive line is going to look like Saturday. And I'm sure Sam Pittman, like a lot of coaches, is not going to tell you here's who's starting. And he may not know till Friday or something, but they had 2 starters. Their center, Ricky Stromberg, who's really, really good. He's one of the best centers in the country, I think. And Dalton Wagner, right tackle, 5th-year guy, very good player, big guy. I mean, and they both had to leave the Georgia Southern game because of injuries, and they had to reshuffle the line. And Sam Pittman's, they did not practice Monday, and he said, he doesn't know. He said they're basically preparing as if those guys won't be able to play. Now, he didn't rule them out. I'd have to say they're questionable, and we'll probably have to wait till pregame warm-ups to know if those guys are dressed out or going with first team. But they do have some depth. They've done a pretty good job of multitasking guys in camp, getting them ready. Sam Pittman's an old offensive line coach, and he said, on Saturday mornings they meet, and maybe for an afternoon game, maybe they do it at night, or Friday night. But he said they basically know 5 deep who's going. Like if something happens to the left tackle, here's what we're going to do. If something happens to the center, here's what we're going to do. And they know about 5 deep. So, they'll have a plan ready, and it probably helps them that the group they ended the game with, or before they started substituting late in the game, that group will probably get to work together this week, and so you figure there'd be more cohesiveness for the game if that's how it turns out to be.
What about on defense? Jimbo mentioned about when you look at such a veteran defense, and of course they return so many starters, how much better is this defense than it was last year because A&M put a lot of points up on. That was a high-scoring game last year. Of course, it was down here. How improved is that defense?
Yeah, they're a lot better. Like you said, they got a lot of guys back, but they added 3 defensive linemen in the transfer portal. 2 of them from Missouri, and Barry Odom, the Arkansas defensive coordinator, was the head coach at Missouri and the defensive coordinator. They got Markel Utze, who's from Little Rock, but he went to Missouri. He's a 5th-year guy. And no, actually, he's a 6th-year guy. I guess they call them super seniors. And they got Trey Williams, who's a 5th-year guy. And they've got a guy, John Ridgway, who's from Illinois State. You might say, well, Illinois State, I mean, that's the Missouri Valley team. But he admittedly said he basically didn't do well. He kind of didn't care about academics in high school, limited options. He stayed from Bloomington, Illinois, stayed home and went to Illinois State. And he's a graduate. When he was in the portal, Texas wanted him, USC, Michigan. I mean, he was heavily coveted. And he's huge. He's 6'6", 320. And he missed the Rice game because he had appendectomy like a week before. And then he's out there against Texas coming off the bench. He had 6 tackles, which we know is a lot for a defensive tackle. He sacked Hudson Card. He's a mammoth in there. So, yeah, those 3 guys, that's their starters. If they go 3-man, they can go 4-man. So they're more versatile there. You might see them in 6 DBs, 5 DBs. They got 3 really good linebackers. I mean, I know Jim said the other day, 2 of those guys, it's really 3. Grant Morgan, Bumper Pool, who's a Texas kid, and Hayden Henry, if people remember Hunter Henry, the great Arkansas tight end who's with New England now, that's his brother. And one of the other Hudson brothers is a tight end, or Hudson Henry is a tight end. And their dad played here in the 80s. He was an all-SWC center against the Aggies, and play against the Aggies. But, Arkansas's defense, they had a lot of guys back, and they added some really key experienced linemen that they really can rotate 7-8 guys in there and stay fresh. And, that's a big deal.
Bob, what about this game? It looks like if it gets down to a field goal, maybe we'll talk about special teams, but what about giving up the home field advantage? I mean, if this game was in Arkansas after what they did to Texas, I think it might be – home field advantage might be worth 5 to 6 points if they're playing in Fayetteville. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Sam Pittman didn't make any secret of the fact that he would prefer to play this game in Fayetteville, especially after Arkansas had to go to College Station last year. And, of course, they were supposed to play in Arlington, but because of COVID, as far as I know, there were not games in pro stadiums. I honestly don't remember what Texas – I guess Texas, you played in the Cotton Bowl, but that's not an NFL stadium. But like Missouri – Arkansas was supposed to play Missouri and Kansas City last year in Arrowhead, and that was Missouri's choice. They moved a couple Arkansas games, home games from Missouri to Kansas City to sort of appease the fans in that area since they're not playing Kansas and Kansas State anymore because obviously they left the Big 12. But that game got moved to Columbia, and then it'll get played in Fayetteville this year. But, there's a contract, and A&M's relationship with Jerry Jones is different than Arkansas's relationship with Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones has given millions and millions of dollars to the University of Arkansas. I mean, they've got a wonderful place where, they have the training table and counseling and academics. It's, I don't know, $12 million building or something. Jerry donated that. If you come to the stadium here, they've got this incredible wild hog statue. It's not a statue. I don't know what, it's a bunch of wild hogs in a fountain. It looks like something you'd see in Rome or something. And Jerry, I think that was like $3 million. Jerry, that's Jerry's deal. And people really love it. It's a neat gathering place to take photos and stuff. And Jerry's given, when they renovated the stadium back in the early 2000s, I know Jerry gave a lot of money for that. And, and Jerry, I mean, he's a businessman. We know, he's made more money than God or whatever, or close to that. But he also, it means a lot to him when he built that stadium, and it's still a great stadium, however old it is. To me, every time I go in there, it's like it's brand new. I mean, you don't see a wrapper on the floor or anything, man. I mean, somebody drops a wrapper, somebody's there to grab for it, hits the floor. But it was really important for Jerry, I think, to get this game there. And, of course, when it was a non-conference game, it was different. But, the Aggies joined the league. But, if Arkansas moved this game to Fayetteville this year, which they could have, that means the contract would have rolled over to 2025. And so now I think both teams honestly want it. on campus. And so when it's done in 2024, I know A&M wants it on campus. Hunter Yurchek's basically, Arkansas AD said Arkansas wants it on campus. But there is a contract to fulfill, and both teams make a lot of money. I think both teams make about $5 million off this every year. It's not like you make $5 million when it's your home game and the other guys make $5 million. No, they both make $5 million every year. So there's an economic component to it too. So, but yeah, it's a neutral site. Obviously, in Arkansas, I'd rather have this game in Fayetteville. And I don't know, what's the line, like 6 points or something for A&M?
5.5.
5.5, 6. Which betting site?
I think if this game was in Fayetteville, it'd probably be a pick'em game. Maybe Arkansas would be favored by a point or two. Maybe A&M by a point or two. But yeah, there's no doubt. I think it helps A&M to get to play in Arlington rather than Fayetteville. But that's just the way it is.
Between Cease and Bob, going back in history, when is the last time that y'all can remember an Arkansas game that was this, this maybe anticipated and had this much effect on the top 25? And maybe just go back between the two of you, some of y'all's favorite A&M and Arkansas memories through the years.
You mean this is the biggest Arkansas A&M game since?
Yeah.
Since when? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's the first time been ranked 5 years. You go back to it, Bob hit on it. Arkansas owned the series there for a while. It wasn't like, A&M was doing well, and then A&M always was focused on beating Texas, just like Bob said. And I always remember when A&M thought they beat them out here. I forget what year it was, with Hatfield and the fish. One of the refs that made the call lived in Arkansas or something, and there was big controversy over that. But there's been a few A&M Arkansas games, but it's like it's hilarious when they said to go back in the conference to be old rivals. Well, everybody in the Southwest Conference was together, but A&M was so focused on Texas, and they weren't having a lot of success about Arkansas. So I don't think they looked forward to Arkansas. And of course, the year A&M was it 75 or whatever, went up there, Arkansas number 2 in the country, and oh my gosh, that was just falling apart 33-6 or whatever. And it's not been a lot of good memories for A&M when you look at A&M Arkansas.
Yeah, that was before my time covering the beat, but I remember that game. Yeah, A&M was number 2 and had that big running back, big
George Woodard.
Yeah, George Woodard. And Arkansas took it to them in Little Rock, and there was like a 3-way tie for the South Conference title. That was Frank Burrell's next to last year. He took them to the Cotton Bowl, and they beat Georgia like 31-10. And so yeah, that was a great win for Arkansas. And you see that. I guess I remember the game when who was the Packers coach that coached the Aggies? I'm having a brain break.
Mike Sherman.
Mike Sherman. I was a Packers fan, so I knew about him. I just couldn't remember his name. But I remember they had a big lead on Arkansas at halftime. And I remember I was I'm not going to say who it was. Somebody from A&M. I saw in the press box, and I said, boy, the Aggies look good. And I think like A&M that year blowing some big halftime leads. And they just kind of went like, I don't know. And then Arkansas had this huge comeback, and Tyler Wilson threw for like 500-something yards. Whatever it was a school record. And, Bob Petrino, you can say what you like about him, but he can X and O with the best of them. And he never lost A&M. He was 3-0 against them. I remember that game. I remember and that game that you were talking about that was in Aggie land, and Arkansas won. Yeah, controversial. Was it a pass interference call?
Pass interference call.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Arkansas pulled it out, and there was Jackie Sherrill's good teams and Ken Hatfield's good teams. Arkansas pulled that out. Quinn Grovey was the quarterback. And I remember my first year on the beat in 81, Arkansas going down to Aggie land, winning 10-7, just a real tough, grinded out. I think Gary Kubiak was the quarterback, and Billy Ray Smith was playing for Arkansas. A couple of good NFL guys, how about more recent Johnny Manziel's first year when Arkansas had coaching problems, came down here in 2012. And just unbelievable. What was that score? Like 60-some to whatever. And that was
59-10.
It was bad. I remember we flew into Houston and drove down to College Station, I guess probably like a lot of people do. And we were driving back after the game. And I remember telling, it was me and Wally Hall and Tom Murphy, our gang. And I said, I used to be of the philosophy that you can't vote a freshman for the Heisman Trophy. I said, if that guy keeps playing like that, he's getting my Heisman vote. And of course, he got a lot of people's Heisman votes because he won the Heisman. But yeah, that's when, and I remember Kevin Sumlin wouldn't let him do interviews. I remember, normally I would do an Arkansas sidebar, but Arkansas was so terrible and Manziel was so great. I said, God, please let me go to A&M's presser, so I don't have to go listen to Arkansas, BS about this. And I remember it was kind of like a theater. So we were in theater seats, or I guess it was a meeting.
Correct. Yeah.
And I remember, I think everybody was begging, like, can we get Manziel in here? And I don't think he came in. I guess it wasn't until later. And that was just such a total beatdown. It was that's when Petrino had been fired and John L. Smith was the interim coach. It was just a total beatdown. And the next year was a little more competitive. Well, actually, a lot more competitive in Fayetteville. Manziel played well again, and A&M won, but that game was at least kind of fun and competitive, But I guess what I remember about the recent games is just how many times Arkansas was in position to win and couldn't close the game out, whether it was a missed field goal or crazy penalty or
the tripping call,
kicking the ball to Kirk. I remember thinking, why did they do that? When he ran it back, Christian Kirk, and A&M would find a way to win, Arkansas would find a way to lose. I mean, you just think, like some of those 2 or 3 overtime losses, and Arkansas must have had double-digit leads in 5 or 6 of those games, and so you just feel like Arkansas, should have won its share of those games, and not only did they not win their share, they didn't win any of them. They haven't won any of them, so. That's kind of what I remember of recent vintage is just A&M doing whatever it takes to win and Arkansas just finding a way to lose, You
look at Mon's long not touchdown run. He got down to where they could score, and you hit on it, Bob. What's funny is, and A&M doesn't even like to talk about their good times against Arkansas during this stretch because it involved Kevin Sumlin. And that was really only Kevin Sumlin's good point, along with beating Tennessee when they were in the top 10 in their close wins over Arkansas to get Bielema fired. So A&M doesn't even like to talk about that recent success because you got to mention Sumlin.
Well, I guess that's an A&M thing, but you got to figure out at some point. You figure Arkansas's got to break through and win, but now that Jimbo's come in, he's really taken A&M to another level. I mean, the recruiting, and you feel like as long as Jimbo's there, they're going to be a top 10 team.
Hey, Bob, I got to ask. I was reading the transcript. I haven't watched the deal from last night. I was too busy. But what's this about Pittman that maybe Jimbo was going to offer him a job as O-line coach? What about that? Is that true, or what's the deal?
I don't know. I had it in my head, and maybe Jimbo mentioned it or something. I Googled it, and I couldn't find anything like Jimbo Fisher offers Sam Pittman. But I just had it in my head that Jimbo had offered him a job, or at least talked to him about coming to A&M when Jimbo went to A&M. Because Sam, when Sam was with Tennessee and got fired, when Derek Dooley got fired and Brett scooped him up and Jim Chaney, their offensive coordinator, and then Sam got like an immediate, raise because we heard Saban tried to hire him. And then Kirby, getting my Saban assistants mixed up here, Kirby Smart hired him at Georgia. And that's really when things started falling apart for Brett. I mean, losing Sam was huge. That's why I thought Sam was a pretty good hire for head coach. Part of the reason was people weren't beating down the door to get the job, and he really wanted it, which I thought was important. And then also I knew how good he'd recruited, how good a recruiter he was, and that things really fell apart at Arkansas when Sam left. That was a huge tipping point. And so I don't remember exactly where I heard it or read it or whatever, but I had it in my head that Jimbo tried to hire him, or at least talk to him. So I thought, well, you know what it is. We don't get these guys every day like we did 30 years ago. And you don't get to get a guy off to the side,
Right.
Like you used to. So sometimes you just got to ask something in front of a bunch of people. And so I think I just said, hey, did he try to hire you? I got that right. And Sam kind of paused. And, we know if somebody tries to hire you, you generally know if somebody tries to hire you. And so Sam could have said, well, no, I love Jimbo, but no, he never talked to me about a job or whatever. But he had this long pause, and then he kind of gave this, odd answer like, well, I really don't know. And it's like, what do you mean? You don't know? No, I'm not going to tell you about it. So maybe we'll have to ask Jimbo about it on the teleconference. But do you guys remember anything like I had it in my head?
No, I did. But it makes sense, though, because, he kept a lot of people wonder why he kept Jim Turner before he went to Cincinnati. So that would make sense because, Turner and Price were the only guys he kept. So that does make sense. And he had problems with the O-line coach at Florida State. That's one of the reasons why he started losing. So when I read that, I go, that makes sense. He'd go after Sam Pittman.
Well, Sam certainly did not shoot it down. He didn't confirm it exactly, but he certainly didn't deny it. And of course, we also heard Sam hired Brad Davis, who had been Barry Odom's O-line coach at Mizzou, and he'd been at Florida. So Sam and he'd played at OU for Sam when Sam was OU's O-line. Well, Sam's been the O-line coach for like all over the place. And, he's never, won for a job. Somebody always wants to hire Sam Pittman. And so we heard that A&M tried to hire Davis because shortly after he got hired at Arkansas, he got a nice little bump in salary. We heard the Aggies tried to hire him. And then LSU did hire him this past summer. He's from Baton Rouge, and LSU, he was getting good money here at Arkansas. I think he was getting $600,000 some. LSU offered him a 3-year deal with over $800,000. Like it goes from $820 to $840, $860, and it's a 3-year deal, and he's guaranteed like $2.5 million.
Wow!
No offense to Brad Davis, he's a fine coach, but O-line coaches are making what head coaches used to make not so long ago, and so. I guess Jimbo's got this history of either trying to hire Sam or trying to raid his staff, which that's a compliment. If you got Frank Burrell's always said, you don't want to have coaches that nobody else wants, but if they're good, you want to keep them, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Well, real quick before we go, let's wheel it around. Is this the year that Arkansas ends the streak? I'm actually thinking that it might be. Bob, do you have any ideas of what you feel in this game yet?
I don't really, being a beat writer, I don't really like to pick a score, but it's funny. We do, and Tom Murphy does a great job. We call them helmets. He does on Saturdays, and he kind of breaks down the positions, like who has the edge at quarterback, who has the edge at running back, down the line. And I remember thinking, man, there's a lot of things that I think are pretty even here. And some of it depends on the injuries, but I started thinking about quarterback, and I'd probably have to give that edge to KJ Jefferson just because he runs the ball well, and he's got a little bit more experience. And running backs, I mean, the Aggies have two of the best running backs around, but Arkansas has got like the stable of guys. Then you look at wide receivers, and of course A&M's got a clear advantage at tight end, but I think it's pretty even. I mean, it's I never thought I'd be saying that a couple of years ago that Arkansas would be able to, go toe-to-toe with A&M physically. And last year, you could really tell physically A&M just dominated the line of scrimmage. They had a better O-line. They had a better D-line. And they still got a really good defensive line. If their O-line's younger, Arkansas's got all these, 6th and 5th year guys. But some of that is if Wagner and Stromberg can play. But, yeah, I think Arkansas's got a real shot to end the streak. I'd have to pick A&M on a neutral field probably, but Arkansas, I think, matches up pretty well with them.
Steve, do you have any feel for this one yet?
Yeah, I just think Bob hit on a lot of things. I still don't know how good A&M is. That includes the defense. Played 3 cream puffs, and I think A&M's defense is good, but they have played absolutely no one. This is their first big test. Arkansas has a win over Texas to me, which gives them something, but A&M, you got to give them the nod just because they've been there. We know they've got 4 All-Americans. Bob's right. Health could determine this. If Robinson doesn't play for A&M or Anaya Smith, or let's say 2 offensive linemen for Arkansas don't play when they've run the ball well, they're not going to run the ball as well with their backups. I think this is a 1-score game going in because there's so many unknowns. Even though we're at week 4, I think it's huge that A&M's not going to Arkansas. If you're going to Arkansas, I would think, man, A&M's maybe in a little bit of trouble, because just going in there, see what Texas did. They didn't even have a chance. Bottom line is I'm looking forward to this game because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think A&M's questions on the offensive line, they haven't necessarily proven themselves yet. And this is, just like Jimbo said, they didn't play physical, and Arkansas is a physical team. So, yeah, this could definitely be that year that this is the year to break the streak. Alex, real quick, what do you got?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a classic A&M Arkansas game like that we've seen the last 10 years. Arkansas probably will have their chances, but we'll see if the Aggies can make it 10 in a row. That'd be pretty impressive considering the series history. And, I mean, beating a team 10 times is probably pretty dang hard. So, I go ahead, Travis.
Oh, I was just going to wrap it up.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Bob, real quick, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, where can they find your work leading up to the game?
Well, ArkansasOnline.com. We also have a Northwest edition, so that's NWA.com. And then we have a website that's basically devoted to all things Razorback, which is WholeHogSports.com. And then, my Twitter, it's kind of like your own phone number. I'm trying to remember my Twitters. I think it's Bob Holt at ADG or at Bob Holt ADG, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. But yeah, if you Google me on Twitter, I think it'll show up at Bob Holt ADG on Twitter.
There it is.
You got to follow Bob, Murphy, and Hall. Those are three legends of the game. They've been up at Arkansas forever. They know what's going on. Respect all three of those guys.
Of course. Yeah, well, Bob, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching. And we'll be back next week for more of the Zoom Hangouts, the My Aggie Nation podcast.
It seems like every day, everything just has a way to burst at the seams. But if we don't watch what we're doing, our hearts will get ruined by silly things. Good love ain't easy, girl, we know that's true. And if we wanna keep it, we gotta watch everything that we do, yeah. Don't wanna make sure, my baby, make sure you're sticking with me. Don't wanna make sure that